Hi, I'm Pratham. In the previous video, we had discussed about the callbacks, promises, and the callback hell, and how can we rescue from the callback hell, that is with the help of promises. And we had discussed this example that we are having a URL which we are fetching from the database and calling the API with that URL and saving the data to the database which comes from the API. And this example is running as this. I had discussed this example as example of callback hell. I had promised that in the next video I am going to discuss about the how we can convert these functions into promises so that we can write this code as like promises chaining code like this. So let's discuss that. So we have this function which is just fetching a data from the database as a fake implementation, and this get data from API which is fetching the data from the API, and this function which is saving data to the database. If you are confused with this example, please check my previous video in which I had discussed all the things in detail, and I have given the link of that video in the description. You can also check from there. So let's start the today's discussion in which we are going to discuss how can we convert this function into promises and the async await and some scenario where the promises are more appropriate than async await. So first let's start with these examples. So let's first try to convert this function into promises. I am making a function get data from database promises which takes an ID and return a promise. So first check this, what this function is doing, that it is just calling the callback with this given data, and this false here indicate whether the error occurs. So being a false implementation, so I have passed just a flag value that if it is a false then there is no error, and if it is true then error occurs. So we can just check some examples. So I have implemented it like this. So let's call this function here. Which is the ID and the callback, that is taking data and error value. So data and error value. If there is error, so we are gonna to reject this promise with the error message, and I am just passing a flag value here. We can also pass the message, and we should pass a message here. So during debugging you can get the exact message and it will be easy for debugging. And if there is not an error, so we are going to pass a data here. So here we have converted this get data from database into promises, which is returning a new object of promises. So I have already converted these two into promises. So here it is, and now if I uncomment this, we can able to get the same result as this implementation is giving. So let's just check. First let me uncomment this and let's check that it is giving the same result as expected. So we have converted our callbacks into promises, and you can check it is very easy to write than this, and it is self-explanatory that what this function is going to do, so it will make easier for developer to read also. Now we are going to discuss about async await. So let's check what is async await. So async await is just a syntactical sugar for the promises. So it makes more clear to write the promises, and it just look like a simple synchronous call. So let's understand this through some example. Let me declare a function wait, which is taking a delay as a parameter and returning a promise which is taking a callback of resolve and reject. We are making a function which create a delay in the code with the value passed in the parameter. So let's make a delay and just consoling here that we have waited for the given time, like waited for delay second, and I am just delaying for just given delay second. Now we are taking an example that we are uploading a multiple file which is taking some time, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds and 1 second. So let's check how can we write it using promises and also from async await. So we have to wait for 2 seconds, then we have to wait for 3 seconds, then we have to wait for 1 second. So as a promise we can write it as like this. But when this promise gets completed, just wait for next file for 3 seconds and then wait for 1 second when this promise gets completed. So let's check how can we write it using async await and understand how async await works. So let's have a function. So async await can be used only on those functions which is started with the keyword async. We can't use async await in the normal function, otherwise it will throw error. So we have to declare a function like this and waiting for 1 second, 3 seconds and wait for 1 second is here and 2 seconds is here. Okay, so first check this, what this is printing, that waited for 2 seconds. Okay, I haven't resolved this here, so we have to resolve the promise. Now let's check this, that it is printing waited for 3 seconds and 1 second. Now let's check this is with async await. I haven't called it, so let's check this now, that it is waited for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 1 second as it is printing. Now you can see that it looks like a synchronous code and as a syntax and works asynchronously. So it is just a syntactical sugar for the promises. And how it is working, let's check this. First, when this function is being called, then it is going to this line number 19, and just call this function which returns a promise which is creating a 2-second delay, and that means this promise is going to be resolved after 2 seconds. So what does await do? It waits here until this function fulfilled its promise or failed. So when this function completed and resolved his promise, then we got a value here. Like if this function is returning value some 2, so we got a 2 in here, and this data contains this 2 here. So then after the first promise gets settled, then it moves to the next, and same works for the next promise. It waits here until this promise gets settled, then move to the next promise. Actually it is not blocking the JS main thread, it is just pushing this event to the event queue, and when this get completed, it just continue with the next line. This is how async await works in JavaScript. Now let's have an example where promises are appropriate to use. Let's have a same example that we are uploading a file. So it takes here 1 3 4 2 6 total 6 seconds to complete, and promise also takes 6 seconds to complete. But in promises we can batch this file uploading as a single promise, and rather than waiting for individual, we can upload them using batching, which makes the JavaScript to perform a parallel processing. How can we do this? We have something like promise.all. Okay, before discussing that, first let's check how can we handle error in async await. Like we handle error in the promise by using catch, and we got an error message, and we just do what we have to do, and in this case we just print that it is giving an error. And let's make some implementation that we have passed an error, and if error, we just gonna to reject the promise with the message error. So here in promises we can handle it by using catch, and it is giving error. So how can we handle these things in async await? So async await is just look like a synchronous code, so we can handle it like using simple try catch. So you can check it now that okay, I haven't passed through here, that error is occurring. So error, so it is working same as this, and now we can also handle error in async await. So now discuss some example where async await are not appropriate than promises. So the example is the same, this that we are uploading a multiple file which is taking some time like 2 seconds, 3 seconds and 1 second. So while uploading the file, the order of the uploading file doesn't matter, so we can batch them and do a parallel processing here, that upload this file independently, upload this file independently, upload this file independently. So here we can do batching of this multiple files. So how can we do parallel processing using promises? So we have something like promise.all, where we are gonna to pass these promises, array of promises, and now when this all promise gets fulfilled, then this calls this handler that all the promise are being settled, all the promises are being settled. So all promises are settled. So here what does promise.all do? It just calls this promise independently. These all promises are independent to each other and runs independently. So it takes overall the promise which take the maximum time. Here in this case we have the maximum value 3, so this complete things are gonna take 3 seconds. So also we can print it, like let's have a start time here, new date dot get time, and end time, and I'm just printing it here, and time minus start time, and it is printing in millisecond. So let's check. So it is taking 3 seconds, the maximum time among all the values which we have passed as an array, and it is working as a batching. And if we do the same thing in this, missing await, and let's just call it, and so you can check this promise settled at 3 seconds, and this takes 6 seconds, 2 3 1, total 6 seconds for completing this function. So here all promises are batched together and works independently. When the all promises are settled, then call this handler, the final handler, and if this promise returns some value, then we got the value here, like data, the first value from weight 2, the second value from weight 3, and the third value from weight 1 as v1, v2, v3. So you can see that here in this case promises are most appropriate because it takes less time to execute, and async await takes more time. So during parallel processing we can use promises rather than using simple async await. Also we can convert this into async await by having this in this function, and just mark a await here like this inside a function. You can also do parallel processing using the both promises and async await combination. Also promise.all rejects the promise if any of them is rejected or not get fulfilled. So let's pass a false here, so you can check this, that let's have also catch here, sorry, I have to pass here a true. If any of them get rejected, then this handler never get called and combined promise never gets settled. So I hope you understand the use of promises and callbacks also in the previous video, and about the async await, that how can we use async await and how it works. So if you like the content, please share the video and subscribe to the channel, and thank you.